he was on the actual carriage where the bomb exploded, and he walked for 2 hours home, and he has no recollection of how he got home.
What have I done?
Yeah,
I'm not respected here. Do they know what I can do? You would have had all those feelings.
It'd blow a hole in the side of a transatlantic plane, which was planned. I think it was coordinated up to 10 or 12 aircraft, all in midair, all flying between the United Kingdom and the United States.
Yeah,
would explode.
Welcome back to part 2 of my chat with retired Scotland Yard Detective Dave Leach. If you listened to part 1, you would have heard Dave taking us deep into some murder investigations he was involved in, talking about the interview room and all sorts of things police-related. We're now going to discuss Dave's involvement in some very high-profile terrorist investigations, because that's where his career went into counter-terrorism. But before we do, Dave, we've talked in part 1 some pretty heavy subjects and murders, and you always carry that baggage with you, and we're going to go into talking about some horrific crimes that occurred, terrorist acts. There is something about policing, and I know you've travelled a bit with your policing and you found your way over to Australia. I've found my way over to the UK, and there's a bit of a tradition amongst police that when you do arrive, you get looked after. And you were telling me the other night that when you're over here that you couldn't put your hand in the pocket because you were taken out. I think you mentioned someone, you said a German-sounding name.
Yeah.
The first name I threw up was Hans Rupp.
That's him. That's him.
I think he was the person that would have been assigned. I know no Hans, a good operator, it would have been assigned the task of looking after you. I want to just say, first up, we get the work done before the recreation starts. But tell us about your trip to Australia.
Yeah, so there is a link, actually, just briefly, with the Belfield inquiry. So picture the scene. I've got this other murder going on. I'm drawn into the Belfield inquiry, and the superintendent comes to the police station where Belfield's being kept, and I've got this application to come down under to Australia, to Sydney, Melbourne and Auckland. For reasons I'm not sure, but it became all of a sudden it became difficult to go abroad and take in their massively important statements, and I'll probably explain to you a bit later. So there I've got him in the yard, and I've confronted him with, listen, you're aware of this job, I've got this application and I need to go to Australia. And he said, I've seen it, he said, but there's like for 2 of you. He said, 2 of you can't go over. We ain't got the money for 2 of you. I said, listen, it's so important to me. I've been on this job for 2 years. These are key witnesses. I'll go on my own. I'm not bothered. I'm not fazed by going on my own. All right, he says, all right. I just bored him to death, I think. Just, all right. Look, let's get this other business out of the way of interviewing Belfield, can we? And then you can go to Australia. So I go to the airport, I get on the plane on my own, and I land in, where did I go first? Yeah, I went to Sydney first.
Yep.
And I get off the plane, and the guy's waiting for me with my name on a little board, and it's Hans Rupp, isn't it?
Yeah.
And first thing that struck me was that he's introduced himself as a detective inspector. I'm writing now. He was a detective inspector.
Yeah.
And I literally just got off the aircraft. He said, right, Dave, he said, you must be a bit tired. I said, yeah. He said, well, I won't keep you too long. He said, I'll introduce you a few lads who can look after you while you're here. We're just going to jump on the ferry and nip round to Manly and have a couple of beers, relax, get to know a few people. So we jump on the ferry, round we go to Manly, and there's a bar there. I haven't been there since I've been back since, but I have actually once. But yeah, it's right on the front there. As you get off the ferry, it's right there. Great bar. And, there I am. I'm confused because I've just got off the plane. Everything's spinning. I've got that horrible tired feeling. I don't quite know everything. The traffic lights, the cars. I'm on a bit of a whirl. And I've got this detective inspector buying me drinks. And I noticed straight off, I said, look, I'll get this one. He went, no, Dave, no. No, we don't do that way over here. And I thought, it was a bit awkward, but okay. And then a few other lads came. A couple of lads. One was a big rugby. I think his name was Quigley or Wiggly or something.
Paul Quigg.
Paul Quigg. Yeah, him.
Yeah, Quigg.
Yeah. Rugby league fella.
Yep.
Great guy.
He is a good fella.
Great guy, wasn't it? Listen, for much as we got a sense of villains, we got a sense of the good guys in the police.
Rock solid, Paul Quigg.
Absolutely. I wish I could remember the old Jerry something was another guy. Don't remember his surname.
Little angry bloke, Jerry Bowden.
Jerry Bowden. That's him.
Yeah.
Jerry.
I know Jerry well. He's a great detective. Shout out to Jerry. Yeah.
Jerry, shout out to Jerry.
You were in trouble there, Dave, if you had that crew taking you out.
Oh, they were hardcore.
Yeah.
Now, I seem to recall that they were drinking kind of smaller beers than me. I seem to remember I was drinking pints or something bigger than they were. But either way, and again, the same thing happened. So they were saying, "Oh, we get this. What are you having, Dave?" And I thought, are they taking the mickey out of me here? Because I could feel something was going on, but I was getting drunker and drunker. I just got off an aeroplane. And we were having such a laugh, And immediately you strike that rapport, And it was fantastic. And I was staying at a hotel in Darling Harbour, but they wouldn't take my money. And this happened over several nights. This isn't the first night. So they dropped me. So Hans said, "Listen, I've got a driver taking you to your hotel. You're clearly not in the right place to get there yourself."
Sensible. Yeah.
So they put me to bed and they said, "Tomorrow morning, give me the time. There'll be a knock on the door. Someone will take you to do your work." And it was in the Blue Mountains. I had to go and see this witness in the Blue Mountains, and it was a lovely female cop. I wish I could remember her name, but I can't. And she knocked on the door with a car, took me to the Blue Mountains, done the work. She stood by while I took the statement. Perfect statement. Definitely 100% needed. And by the time we got back, it was time then to go to something to eat. We'll take you to something to eat. But I was expecting one or two lads, but the whole team were there.
No, it's and look, I can say it's reciprocal because I went over and you said one of the stations you worked at, Kensington. I did an inquiry over there, the death of Carolyn Byrne, and I was over there working with Scotland Yard and Metropolitan Police, and they did the same thing. Couldn't put my hand. I was there with Jason Evers, and we got there. We got the person we're looking for. We spoke to that person. And then they took us out, and I don't know, you might have even been involved for all I know, but it was a big night, and the next day I found myself in Buckingham Palace, but inside. That's a story in itself. I'll explain that one later.
Oh, I'm glad it's reciprocated, because I'd never seen anything like this.
Yeah, it's and at the homicide office in Sydney, we had so many people coming through, but that's part of it, and it breaks the barriers down, and you talk, and you realise you talk the same language, and I think that's part of it. And the work has to come first, and the work's always done. But
I'm not sure how it was financed, but at the end of the day, I tell you, we had to put in money each week into the social fund. That's it. That explains it.
Yeah.
So although they were there, and there was two other guys, and one of them, and this is interesting from a policing perspective, because this guy was from up Queensland, and he was doing inquiries too. So there was me from London, there was this guy from Queensland who ended up being a DI, and he was from Rockhampton way or something from the top of my head. And I actually, because we swapped cards, when I went back to London, it could have been 18 months later, he wanted me to do some work for him.
Yeah.
And I knew him. So he contacted me. It cut out all that bureaucracy, and I did some work for him. The
networking helps, doesn't it? Because if you go through Interpol, which you have to, it can take forever. But
we did it that way, and we were on this speedboat being driven around the harbour and stuff. Then we went over the harbour bridge. We did the walk over the top. Yeah, as a group, and all these boys are there. And what's his Quiggy was there. Quiggy was there because I remember Quiggy. And then we had helicopter. I've got a helicopter, and then we went and played golf.
Okay,
and it's all being paid for, but off duty because I had to take days off before I then went on to Melbourne. And
we don't want to give people the wrong idea,
impression.
But the homicide, I think it was $10 a fortnight or $10 a week that we put into the social fund, and that was to cover costs like that. So when you guys came over.
Yeah, it wasn't the police playing. And sure, these guys were part of the process, so they would have enjoyed the day's golf or whatever too, but they paid for me. Yeah. And we went to the Rocks for a drink one evening, and I pulled out my money. I said, "Listen, boys, I've had enough. I'm going to pay for this." And one of them grabbed the money and tore it up.
Ripped it up,
gave it back to me.
Yeah.
And then I went to Melbourne. Charlie Bazzina picked me up from the airport, and the whole thing happened again. Exactly the same thing happened again. I ended up being looked after. This time a little bit different. Charlie and his wife looked after me, bless them, and I've been friends with them ever since. But the boys took me out and we went for a drink. I went up in a helicopter, went on a speedboat.
You come back exhausted, not just from the police work you've got.
Needed a holiday, but it was just one.
But it balances out, and that networking does help. But it is part of the tradition. But as I said, it's reciprocal because you guys did the same to myself and Jason when we were over there. Okay, we're going to talk now about your time in Counter Terrorism. Yeah. So, what's the squad's called in?
Well, yeah, when I went there, it was the anti-terrorist branch,
right?
But as usual, it changed its name to Counter Terrorism
Dave,
Command.
I want you to give more respect to the people that come up with these names. I think you're treating it too lightly.
From the police force to the police service.
Yeah, we've done that.
Yeah.
I think we follow you guys 10 years behind because we had a commissioner, Peter Ryan, that came over from the Met after there was a corruption and all sorts of things, Royal Commission, which most police forces have gone through, and then they decided they wanted a clean start, and we got someone from England came over and was our commissioner. And the New South Wales Police, and that's, we're 16,000 people. It's a big police force. And he implemented a lot of the British stuff. So the stuff that you talk of from force to service and all that, I know what you're talking about because we've lived and breathed it over here. Okay, so we're in the counter-terrorism or the special terrorist response, whatever. You're working on counter-terrorism. But look, there's a job that you worked on that a magnitude of which we haven't seen in this country, and the 2005 London bombings. And that was in the, I think 3 bombs went off in the subways. That's and right, one on a bus. Horrific crimes. I remember watching it play out from over here. Yeah,
I mean, it's one of those moments that you and I touched on earlier that just the very mention of it brings back emotion. Because, again, you didn't, at the time, you just kind of got on with it. But I was kind of fortunate in a way. I didn't go underground recovering body parts. I didn't do that. I dealt with witnesses at Russell Square, taking statement from witnesses, and you're talking about torsos flying through the air and landed in front of them and stuff like that, bits of body flying about. And another guy who explained how he was on the Edgware Road train and he was on the actual carriage where the bomb exploded, and he walked for 2 hours home, and he has no recollection of how he got home, or he was clearly suffering from the blast and the shock. And look, witness statements like that, which were so emotional and so, I mean, we weren't searching for suspects, of course, because they blew themselves up, but it was horrific, to the point of we'd never seen the like of it, with the Americans with 9/11 and stuff. They'd gone through it, and then it was our turn.
I suppose you were hardened to a degree because you had the IRA bombings and that, but that was probably preceded the previous generation. It wasn't people that were on the ground for that.
True. Because the previous generations, they'd heard about the IRA bombings, but we lived in it. We'd moved on from all that, and then all this other threat was coming.
So a magnitude of an investigation that size, who's running it and what sort of resources? So if I'm looking at it from a police response point of view, you've got to present something to a coronial inquest to find out what's happened. There'd be a line of inquiry going for suspects. You got suicide bombers, so they're gone, but there's other people involved, you would assume. So you'd be having a lot going on. How is it all brought in together?
Well, in simplistic terms, we've talked about the Holmes computer machine system. And computer system. So it was used as a secure home system. So it's a secret system, not top secret, because top secret stuff can't go on homes. It has to be on another system again. So we got a secret system, and then what we did was we split it between each job. So we got the Edgware Road tube bombing, then we got the Russell Square bus, and each one of those different scenes was split into different inquiries, and the Holmes machine would be running via the members of staff on it, would be creating those actions, and the officers would be off, and bit by bit by bit would all be put onto the Holmes machine. All the statements, every bit of forensic, all the MI5 stuff that was coming in, because don't forget these suspects were part of MI5, MI6 prior to. There was always an element of a little bit of that. So all that stuff was coming in, and we had. I'm going to talk about another job in a minute. This was big.
Yep.
And up until that point, the biggest kind of inquiry the country had ever seen, in as much as all the information we had to put together.
I'm just trying to comprehend, like CCTV footage and all that. It's there was a special unit, the Counter Terrorism Command, anti-terrorist group as we were, that they had their own unit. There was a specialist CCTV collection team, dedicated anyway. Yeah.
They existed. There's a forensic team. So this isn't divided up into different troops like it is on homicide. So I might be advanced, I might be exhibits officer on a particular murder one day and then I'm not on the next. I might be CCTV or whatever. But on the Counter-Terrorism Command, such is the vast scale of it that we've got committed officers. That's their job all the time. Lots of officers loved the forensic side because, to be perfectly frank, it's interesting work, but they'd earn a lot of money because they would be working all the time, as were the collection guys of the CCTV. But what then that did, that freed up other guys to do. I'm using the word guys. Forgive me. I'm talking about guys, girls. You know, so officers would be freed up to take statements and create other lines of inquiry, whatever they may be. So you weren't getting slowed up. You were concentrating on witness statements. So if you took a witness statement, it went into the Holmes machine and you'd identified an action task would be raised to go and see another one as a result of your statement. You already had a feel for that. So you'd go on and you would use your common sense sometimes. You wouldn't wait for the Holmes machine because it is slow to churn out. So you'd say, well, I took a statement from him. He mentioned her. I'm going to go and see her. And you just roll on. Yeah. And I would have been in charge of teams of officers at DS level, teams of detectives.
Getting statements.
Going out and then they'd contact me. I've got this, Dave. What do you want me to do? I'd say, well, crack on, go and see that bloke.
And you're trying to recreate what happened and then potentially get a breakthrough where, okay, if this person, that might have led to this person was carrying the bomb. How did it affect you personally? Like it's your city, your town, your people, and that happened. Was it? I'm just trying to get a sense of the attitude of the strike force or the investigation group that were being highly motivated.
Yeah, I think. I mean, you can break it down a little bit closer. I mean, I'm born and brought up in London, so the IRA bombings affected me as a kid growing up.
Yeah.
And you are massively protected. Imagine how you'd feel if Sydney was bombed.
Yeah.
And then you've got you've got the London thing, and then you've got the English-British thing as well, and this attack. But the other thing, you know, these characters were educated, some born and educated in England and the UK. So you'd have to it's very hard to get your head around that.
Yeah. Who are you angry at?
Yeah. I mean,
who's to blame?
These are troubled souls for, you know, they're indoctrinated.
How quickly did it come out who was responsible for it?
Quick. Pretty much straight away.
But because they claimed it or because...
they claimed it. They had, you know, there was suicide videos done.
Yeah.
Big flag put up. Their reasoning why. You know, we were, you know, in Afghanistan and stuff, et cetera. So it was fairly quickly. So it was really much putting together a story.
Yeah.
So that it could go, you know, as you say, at the very end of it all, it would go before the coronal kind of side of it, and you know all that, and it took a long time.
And it's not just recreating what's happened. It's trying to work out, could have this been prevented at some stage? I would imagine that's the whole thing. Where there'd be that school of the investigation. Were there any indicators before this happened? That would all come into play. There
always is, and that's where the media get there. That's where they get a foothold and do a bit of damage. They normally point the finger at MI5.
Yeah.
And MI5, by the very nature of the beast, don't disclose or want to disclose what they've got, or more importantly, how they've got it.
Yeah.
Because, you're starting to give away secrets there that would cause problems in the future when other bombers wanted to
protect the methodology in situations like that. Working on an investigation of that magnitude, was it costly to, and I'm talking emotional cost to people, did people fall off the wayside? It was just too much, like police working on that type of investigation?
Yeah, you're talking about we weren't going home. We weren't going home.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure it here. If I was in the cops and that happened, you wouldn't see home for weeks.
We were putting hotels in and around Scotland Yard, and we were bringing in officers and staff to man the major incident rooms, i.e. the home suites and everything like that. Some civilian staff, some cops from all over the country. So Scotland Yard and all the hotels in and around London were full of police staff from all over the country.
Yeah.
And that was in 2005. And then a year or so later, we had that other Operation Overt, which followed in suit. Yeah,
can we talk about that? Because finishing on the London bombings, it's happened. The pressure on there, the magnitude, the scale of it is something that most people don't get to see, and you're involved in that. But then Operation Overt, which was 2006, and it was a terrorist threat, not an attack, but a potential attack. Can you tell us? And I know there's public record. I'm not asking you to say anything that's off public record. But can you tell us about that and your experience on that investigation?
What I should explain as well is that, whilst in the world of homicide, murder as we know it, I at DS level was fairly involved, and at detective level was fairly involved in the solving of murders. I would be a key at the meetings, key with suggestions, key with ideas, key with evidence, etc. When you change that to this Counter Terrorism Command. And you've got the world of MI5, MO6, and then the Counter-Terrorism Command, that you're just you feel you're a very small cog. You understand that you're very important, but it's very different. So you don't get the full picture.
Okay, that's interesting.
You have to accept that the task, or as action as we know it, you have to accept that that's very important and that you need to do that job properly. And you have to motivate your staff, because a lot of us were ex-murder, and they're used to a whole different feel, and it was very hard. And I found it difficult, if I'm honest.
Well, I could imagine, like your Belfield experience. You're going to interview him. You're involved in the interview. You're not getting that at this. You might be doing a very specific task.
Yeah, and I don't mind saying.
Yeah.
It's a funny story, but kind of not. But when I first went on the Counter Terrorism Command, I was sent down to Paddington Green, where we had some suspects in for terrorism. And I was at the very pinnacle of my career. I was the kind of main man, or one of, to do the interviews.
Yeah.
And I decided to go to terrorism because I thought it'd be the next move. A little bit scared of rotation, but I thought it'd be the next move. So when I got there, I was sent down to Paddington. True story. Sat in the in the suite. 2 guys in for terrorism, and the boss came in, and the boss said to me, "Dave, I understand you're from homicide. I want you to do one of the interviews." I thought, yeah, that's great. Yeah, read this stuff. Probably give you a no comment, but read this stuff. Right. So I'm there reading all this stuff. 2 or 3 hours later, in came a collection of officers that were old school anti-terrorists. They've been on it years.
Yeah.
Rotation at that stage was not even conceived for them. They
just left them.
And I understand all the skills and everything else, but listen, the truth of it was that they got all the best work on the terrorist command. They'd been there that long. It was a kind of a clique.
Yeah.
Right. And I get that. So the boss calls me and he says, "Dave, change your plan." He said, "Could you do us a favour?" He said, "Can you get a pad?" He said, "Go round." He said, "And you're not doing the interviews now, by the way. I've got these other lads coming in. They're going to do that."
Right.
I said, "Okay." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm going to have chicken and chips." He said, "Could you see if he wants fish and chips?" If he wants... I swear to God, that's true.
Yeah.
So I've gone from that, from the pinnacle of my career, I'm going to interview a terrorist.
Yeah. So
I went down the chip shop.
did you get the orders right?
I got the, and also later on that week, they needed a television. Remember when I was an electrician?
Yeah.
They needed a television. The same boss said to me, you got to laugh. He said, Dave, he said, I think it was American Express. He said, I've got an American Express card. It's a job one. He said, Edgware Road was down the road. That's where all the TV shops were. He said, go down the road. He said, you get a television. He said, buy a TV. He said, you're an electrician, weren't you? He said, see if you can wire that television in, right, so that the boys can watch Sky News, because a lot of information's coming in on Sky News before we even get it, and we need to know where we are and all that. And we had all this Sky News back at Scotland Yard, so it was all round every floor, but we didn't have it at Paddington Green. So I spent the next 2 days, bearing in mind I've been to the chip shop, I'm now spent the next 2 days buying some coax aerial cable, running it round the room. I bought in my drill from home. I was drilling through, this is a police station, right? I'm drilling through corners of above doors, feeding the coax cable through and the cables, and I wired up a telly.
And so where are we going with this, Dave? Is that the end of your terrorist career?
No, it got better than that. It got better than that, because that was at the beginning. That wasn't Operation Overt, but I digress.
But I understand what you're saying, and it would have been hard. Like, you're laughing about
Small
it, but you've got to accept it.
It destroyed me.
Yeah.
Initially, it destroyed me, and I wanted out of that.
You would have been
command.
thinking, what have I done?
Yeah,
I'm not respected here. Do they know what I can do? You would have had all those feelings.
I did escape the terrorist command, because that feeling never really went away. And that feeling of being a small cog, I understood that, I was part of it. I mean, I got commended on Overt. I went before the commissioner and got commended for my work for putting the television in. No, I didn't. It wasn't for that. That wasn't for that. Although I should have been with hindsight. But Operation Overt broke, and we ended up initially with doing surveillance. MI5 came to us and said, look, we've got this team of characters in and around London, and as we speak, they're putting together liquid bombs. They're creating bombs. They didn't know it was liquid bombs at the time, but there's explosions in the woods, and we've got a surveillance team. We're bringing in more, and I think we had, I stand to be corrected, but virtually every surveillance team in the whole of the United Kingdom in and around working on this inquiry. Yeah. And
did you have any idea what the bombs were going to be used for?
No.
Right. So I think the information.
And you'll have to forgive me, because, again, I have to go back. I'm that very small cog. Yeah. So I don't know what MI5 and stuff knew, but I was party to a lot of stuff that was coming in, because I worked in the major incident room at the time. So I had a team under me that was putting a lot of the information in and stuff. So they were following them to woods, and then we were identifying what we would call the bomb factory, where they were creating and making these bombs. But the principle, in a roundabout way, was we had these drinks bottles, or they had these drinks bottles called Oasis. This drink called Oasis, it was effectively a citric drink of orange or lemon or whatever. And then they would use the bottle, and they would use a syringe on the bottom and put hydrogen peroxide. So they'd take a bit of the liquid out, then they'd squirt in hydrogen peroxide, which they were buying. It's involved in the hairdressing business, and you can get hold of it. Like, vast quantities would create suspicion, but they were buying this stuff, and they were being followed all around the country by surveillance teams.
Okay, so you knew something was brewing.
So we knew kind of where we're at. The surveillance teams were picking up what they were buying. Typical surveillance team, they would go in and follow, and they would pick up from the bill, the receipt. Thereafter, inquiry team would go in and find out what they were buying and all this stuff. Yeah. That's where we kind of came in. We would do the follow-up stuff. Surveillance team would put points in the right direction. So they effectively were creating this situation where they had these liquid bombs, which they weren't bombs in themselves. So you had to detonate these things. So what they were going to do then, and this is for those listening who know more than me, I apologise, but this is a crude way of explaining that they would use disposable cameras, which they would take onto the aircraft. So they take the liquid, to all intents and purposes an ordinary drink, the disposable camera, strap that around the drink, pop into the toilet, the flash or whatever from the disposable camera would be enough to detonate the hydrogen peroxide. There would be citric acid squirted into the thing. So the whole combination, which is, to be honest, I can't remember it fully, but that's basically where it would be.
Yeah.
Create a liquid bomb, which wouldn't blow the plane up, but it'd blow a hole in the side of a transatlantic plane, which was planned. I think it was coordinated up to 10 or 12 aircraft, all in midair, all flying between the United Kingdom and the United States.
Yeah,
would explode.
So, we talked about you working around the clock with the London bombings, the aftermath of it, but with something like that would be round the clock. You just
this was even bigger. It was huge.
The pressure on when do you move, because that would be. I'm just looking at it from an operational point of view. At what point in time do you move on this crew? But you've got to prevent. That's got to be the primary drive of the investigation. But a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, we moved all of a sudden. I don't know if you've read this. Or
I saw that there was, it was an international situation, because you got the United States and you got the UK, and so everyone's having their 2 cents worth.
Yeah, from memory, one of our suspects went off to Pakistan, and the United States were a little bit uncomfortable about that, and basically went in to try and deal with him, with the Pakistani authorities, and try to deal with him. Yeah. And we had to move that night. So all of a sudden, you finish work after a long day, and you're just on your way home, and it was everything just, pardon the pun, exploded. Everyone went, right, that's it. Everyone back in. We're going out. Yeah. We're going out, and we're kicking doors in that night, and we're dragging these boys in. All of a sudden, literally, on the day. It was huge.
It is huge, and I don't think people would fully appreciate the coordination in an operation of that magnitude, that there is so many moving parts, and you need people with the experience to be involved in that. Otherwise, it would just be chaos.
Yeah.
But,
and the guy in Pakistan got his comeuppance, but I think, I don't know if you've read it, but the Americans took care of him later on, and his involvement in other stuff. But it was unfortunate, but listen, the politics, again, I reiterate, are way above my pay grade. They had their reasons, and our guys, at the very top, had their reasons. But it was successful, and they were all arrested, and we prevented. And that's why now, when you go to the airport, for those people listening, will understand, that's why when you go to the airport, you can't take liquid. It has to go into a bag, and it has to be a certain size, etc., etc., etc. And that's why that happened. That's why that came about.
Because of that.
Because of that. Yeah.
Well, it's a different style of policing, but the importance is just huge. So it's a diverse career in homicide, and I always thought homicide was my passion, but I thought, and we had all that rotation stuff, and I got rotated out of homicide when I was a sergeant. But came back to homicide. I always thought if I wanted to make a move somewhere, counter-terrorism would have been an interesting one. And the way you describe it, different types of pressure, different type of work. Yeah. But, not.
You'll have to trust me, because you didn't do the counter-terrorism in the end, did you?
No.
The homicide was a lot more satisfying.
Right.
In as much as you've got a real better feel for everything, and you're actually more involved. That's not taking any away from counter-terrorism, because it's a specialised area.
Yeah. Oh, and the importance of counter-terrorism too. It's predictive, isn't it? You've got a homicide is a reactive way of investigating. Most times, unless you're chasing a serial killer. Yeah. But with counter-terrorism, a lot of it's proactive. Trying to prevent it.
Yeah, these days it tends to be disruption. We call it disruption. They'll go in quite early, and they'll arrest suspects for fraud, all sorts of other offences, and lock them up prior to any leading up to terrorism.
Yeah, understand the logic there. But anyway, that wasn't the highlight of your policing career. The highlight was New Zealand.
Yeah. So
how did you, I say that sarcastically, and I probably shouldn't, how did you end up in New Zealand?
So what happened is, as a result of the tube bombings and Operation Overt, my marriage failed.
Right. Okay. And look, I'll not make light of that, because I've seen it happen too many times in policing. That's happened to me. But like a pressure of that job, you change as a person when you work under that pressure.
Yeah. there was a lot of pressure on the marriage. And, you know, when you're an old school CID officer as well, so you'd have had all those years. I was an electrician at the BBC coming home pretty much on time. Then all of a sudden I joined the police, and then I was, after work, we'd go for a beer in the pub, and that was our way of, you know,
de-stressing,
de-stressing and discussing what we'd worked on, etc., etc. So all that goes on. But if you're the wife or partner of someone who's in that, that's hard to take when you knew a life before that. It's not like you bought into that. I met my wife when we were very young. So it's with much regret that put pressure on the marriage. And, you know, it wasn't long after. In fact, it all happened during that Operation Overt, really. It started taking place where things got difficult. And then I decided that I'd had enough of counter terrorism for that reason, and I took a job at Wimbledon as a DS in a main CID office.
Right.
That was my first realisation of how things had changed, because I've been away so long. And while I was there, and just before I left to go there, I was approached to one of the lads he'd got a job in New Zealand police, and he spoke to me. He said, "Look, you know, your situation being what it is, have you thought about going to New Zealand?" And I'd been over there, obviously, as I described earlier. So I got a feel for New Zealand. It's a beautiful place, and I like the people. And I thought, well, and I knew guys were going to Australia as well, but they were going to Western Australia, but Sydney, Melbourne, places like that weren't offering up work. So I thought, well, look, if I'm going to have no money and be skint, at least I might have some sunshine. So let's go in search of sunshine. So
everyone has their dream.
Yeah. So I thought, I'll have a bit of sun. So if I'm going to be miserable, at least I won't have any clouds over my head permanently. So a fella called Bruce Shadbolt, who was a DI from Auckland, came over with a couple of guys. One names on the spot. I know, you know, I've forgotten their names, but I haven't, but I have. And they came over, and I did this fitness thing where I ran between lampposts down towards Buckingham Palace. This is typical Kiwi. They keep it real. They keep it as it, you know, this is real world. This is running between lampposts. Why do we have to put you on a track, or why do we have to put you on a machine? This
is your legitimate.
I turned up down on the Mall in a pair of shorts. I walked out of Scotland Yard, put my shorts and my T-shirt on, and walked down there. And I'll never forget the other guy, not Bruce, but the other guy saying, "Listen, Dave, you're a man of a certain age. You're older than these guys. So if you take a look around you," he said, "that you're not going to keep up with this, Sammy. Just pace yourself. He said, "We're going to go between that lamppost and that now." I think it was 1.5 miles in so many minutes.
What did you say? Stuff that?
And I went, no, that's fine. Because I was
as fit. In stuff that, I'm not going to just try and keep up with them.
As in stuff that, I'm going to
beat them.
I beat them all. I beat them all because, listen, I've noticed it a lot. I noticed it at fitness tests when I came back. The younger people, not all of them, they might do the weights and all that, but they seriously can't run.
Yeah.
And I cruised that, and I got offered a job in Auckland as a detective. I was a detective sergeant.
So you had to leave the Met?
Yeah, they wouldn't let me go on a career break.
Yep.
Too many cops were leaving, and I would love to have gone on a career break. So I went to live. I rented it. I went over there with no money, really, and I managed to persuade this place, big, lovely, beautiful apartment block in a place called Ariwa in Auckland, the North Shore of Auckland. I managed to persuade them that I was going to pay them as soon as the police paid me. And I got this apartment overlooking the ocean, and I couldn't, I'd gone from London to, I was like, whoa, this is like something else. But with respect to the New Zealand police, they wanted some work out of me as well. But I was in the world of this is the greatest.
They take all the fun away, don't they?
Yeah. So I went into work in the main office, the main CID office at Auckland, and soon found myself on homicide inquiries. You know, one particular guy who murdered his prostitute girlfriend, kept her in bed for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's horrible.
I ended up on that.
Did you find the work, the skill set that you had from London, the UK, transferred over into New Zealand?
Two things really were apparent. Yes, it did. And the police family, as we might call it, was just the same. The characters were the same fun, you know, all that.
Yeah.
They're not quite like the Aussies, not quite as kind of out there and as kind of, you know, kind of loud and bold.
Well, you're probably basing that on hanging out with Hans Rupp, Paul Quigg and Jerry Bowden.
Correct.
Okay.
That was the impression I got.
Yeah.
So all they did was bash me up about how rubbish our cricket team was, et cetera, et cetera. But we did win the Ashes when I got home. But anyway,
right.
and I did let Jerry and the boys know that. But yeah. So I'd gone to New Zealand, and it was just one guy looking after me. He was a nice guy, very quiet. But he left me alone in the evening, and I was drifting around on my own, eating and drinking. But it wasn't quite the same. And again, I'm coming across like I'm criticising the Kiwis. I'm not.
It was just a different
culture.
Yeah.
That's how it is. If anything, I was more like the Aussie, and I was coming from London, and I was a bit more brash and out there, and I know I stepped on a few toes, because straight away what I realised was that the bureaucracy and the paperwork with the Kiwis was ridiculous.
What worse than what you experienced?
Worse, much worse. Ours was a lot more structured. But what I realised was that the POMs had been in and were coming in at every level, at DS level and DI level, or being promoted from within, and were changing things. And I can illustrate that quickly by saying, so when you arrest someone, there would be a series of paperwork, and there'd be number 1, number 2, number 3, whatever, and you would just fill out these forms. But what I was found, there was duplication. There was a lot of duplication. So brief facts, you'd have to do this brief facts thing, which you do for the case papers when you charge someone, and then you do it for your own hierarchy. There wasn't a kind of a copy of. You had to do it twice.
Processes.
I found that a bit difficult, but I also found massive resentment.
Yeah, and look, I'd like to say that I think policing, the way it should go, is that it should be like a qualification and transferable skill, where you could come over from UK, do a refresher course over here, and here you go, you can investigate homicides in Australia. But I know over in Perth or Western Australia, they got a lot of, at all ranks, English police coming over, and I know there was a bit of resentment over there. Here in New South Wales, we had senior UK police come over. They didn't open up holus bolus like they did in Western Australia. And I can sort of understand the resentment, but really it should be, if we're better human beings, it should be embraced. It shouldn't, you bring a skill set that you might be able to upskill if you came and worked in New South Wales homicide, and vice versa. Yeah,
I personally took the line of, I wasn't going to come over shouting from the rooftops I was better than them. I didn't see it that way, and I didn't go in that way. So I just, I found the quality of some of the sort of, I was a detective, and I had a detective sergeant in charge of me, and he had about 6 years service. I had 23 years, and there was a DI as well on my team, but he was coming in at detective level.
Yep.
So we went into the restaurant one day, and there was a trainee detective, and this young detective sergeant, and he said, this is it. He said, this is the hierarchy here, so everyone gets it. And he looked around the table. He said, there's me. I'm the detective sergeant. I'm in charge of this team. Next is my detective, whose name escapes me, detective. Next is my trainee detective. And then he looks at you, and then there's you two.
Yeah.
So you kind of knew where you
sat.
Yeah. Okay. And that wasn't true of every, that was just this. I ended up with this particular character. So we ended up falling out, and I threw him out the car one day. I was driving him, and he upset me, and then I pulled over in the car, and I said, right, that's it, I've heard enough.
Has he been found yet?
You're going to get out.
Should I caution you at this stage?
I didn't hurt him physically, but he was hurt because I read him the right act and gave him a few home truths one night. I just said, look, mate, put the brakes on. Pulled up in a car park at a shopping centre, and I said, listen, that's it, I'm done with you.
Yeah,
you're going to have to get out. You're going to have to get out, because you're just picking on me day after day after day after day, and you're getting me down, get out. Anyway, he literally got out, and then the DI called me into his office the next day.
Yeah.
And he said, listen, I'd heard about what happened. He said that, and I explained, and he said, oh, I'm sorry about that. And he has got a problem, and there is a bit of a past with this guy. He's a bit anti-POM.
Well, I think it just shows insecurity. That's my personal view on it. I'd judge you come over here and see what you like work-wise. So the New Zealand little escapade didn't last too long. How long did you spend over there?
I was approached again. Bruce, I think Bruce was a bit surprised, but one of the others said, listen, I've got a job for you in Wahiki Island. You'll be the only detective on the island. We could do you over there. Yep. So I went over there. And I was involved in all sorts of stuff. And to be fair, there was a guy there was a bit of resentment. There was a sergeant there, uniform sergeant. There was a bit of a clash there too, but I can get it from his side as well. He wanted a bit, but I was a detective, and he wanted me to deal with traffic offences. He wanted me to deal with everything, as well. And I found that a bit awkward because that's not my background, but I kind of tried.
Yeah.
We'd do a drink drive track. I remember once we did a drink drive and we stopped cars. I was in my yellow vest with police on it, but I was a detective. I opened the door and this fella fell out. He just collapsed onto the street. I mean, I picked him up, arrested him, went to court with it.
So that
And then there was another one, and the newspapers photographed me. We had this, I think there was a big volcanic eruption in Japan or somewhere, and everyone was on like tsunami watch. So I'm out with a loudspeaker, yellow jacket, everyone high ground, everyone. I'm doing that, detective. And I'm doing all that, and the tsunami hit.
Yeah,
it was about 10 inches.
I remember when that one came through because it was. I think it was. Yeah.
Probably at all these beaches, everyone was on the high ground.
Oh yeah, after because it can cause devastation if it comes through. But okay, so you how did you find your way back into the Met then?
I just couldn't settle on Waiheke Island in the end. The ways and means of dealing with stuff. I was interviewing drunks and I was doing it while they were drunk. I couldn't get my head around it. And they were saying, well, we find they tell the truth when they're drunk. And I was like, but how's that hold up in court? It was bizarre. And I just couldn't make sense of it all. And in the end, I had 2 children back home. And I went back to London for my boy's 18th birthday. And I got a bit kind of, went back to London, saw the Thames, got a bit kind of, and I thought, but I'm done here.
So did they let you back in?
Well, they wouldn't. I had to apply for a job, and there was a job, would you believe it, on the Counter Terrorism Command.
Right.
This is the command I left because I just wasn't that comfortable, but it was the only job I could go back into. Yeah. And I put in for the job and got the job, but I had again, and they wouldn't have me as a DS. I had to go back in as a detective on the proviso and the promise that I would have and then I had to fight bureaucracy. Listen, it's a story for another day, but someone had said something about me, something had flashed up somewhere, and I got accepted, and then I got all the way back to England and they pulled it and said, sorry, you can't join. I said, but I've just given up a life in Australia.
Yeah.
Hamish Campbell, boss, this has happened. I don't know what else going on. Hamish Campbell had a little dig around. Nothing to do with me. It wasn't my fault. Something had been said.
Yeah.
It hadn't been bottomed out. He bottomed it out, got my job back, went on that terrorism command.
Yeah.
And I stayed there, and I enjoyed it a lot more this time. And then I got fed into what I finished up on, which was a legacy investigation into the IRA.
Yeah, is that I've spoken briefly about this on a podcast, so I'm a little bit aware of it. It was Nick Caldos who did a review. He was a deputy commissioner over here, great police officer. He was involved in, I believe it was a review on that. Is that where they had the informant? Is it Steak Knife?
That's right.
And there was issues about, he was an informant, but he was also doing IRA stuff to the extent, and tell me if I'm wrong, but involved in murders whilst being an informant. Was that the...
Yeah. The accusations were, it went to a court, it went to judge level, and the judge ordered an inquiry.
Yeah.
So then they got to find the money and the resources. Well, the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, the ex-RUC.
Yep.
They didn't have any funds for this, really. They had some money, but they didn't have staff. They couldn't have the staff. So it was given a fellow called John Boucher, who was ex-Met, but was then the Chief Constable of Bedfordshire, to kind of oversee an inquiry. So it started off as quite a small team.
Yep.
And so what you've got is the accusation that Steak Knife was an IRA member, and his job was to interrogate suspected informants within the IRA.
Right.
They called them touts. But so if you were an IRA man and you were talking to the British Army, or you were talking to the RUC, you would at some stage come to the notice of the IRA hierarchy, who would call in Steak Knife and others like Steak Knife, who allegedly was working for the British Army. And then Steak Knife's role allegedly was that he was involved in murders, or he was doing the interrogation, and then others would carry out the murder. So you'd end up with this body being found down an alleyway somewhere in Belfast. So it was to explore the whole thing, and that basically was exploring the army and their records. It wasn't looking at the army specifically. It was looking at the whole thing, and you can look at it at all sides. Typically with Northern Ireland, the politics, and depending on perhaps your own beliefs, your own politics, or we had a job to do and we did it as best we could, which was to go after the evidence for someone else to decide the rights and wrongs of it.
Okay, so you're gathering the evidence and then presenting it to the inquiry.
That's exactly it. And that's where it stands now, because what we did was, over a 5-year period, was interview soldiers, interview high-ranking soldiers, interview politicians, interview the IRA, interview IRA hierarchy, members of the family, and we were doing it. We were doing it, and I think we've done a really good job, to the point of where now they're talking about setting up a legacy team to review and look at other historical crimes within Northern Ireland. But all this is all about money, whether there's the money there, So I did that for 5 years. And that took me over there, Belfast and stuff,
Wow, a diverse career in law enforcement, haven't you?
Yeah, it came to an end in the end because I had a bit of a health scare, and then COVID hit. So, I kind of ended up working from home a lot, and then working from a different police station locally to me down in Sussex. But then came the end.
And I suppose the highlight of your career is coming on I Catch Killers in New South Wales.
Yeah. I think today is the highlight. I'll be able to talk about this with a few friends back home.
Well, there you go. We'll pack you up with a little tape in your pocket, so you'll be able to go back and some photos.
I've told a few people they're keen to listen.
Yeah. Well, look, I've loved the chat. It's been a great chat, but I promised I'd let you get back to your holidays, which I will after I give you a little bit of Australian hospitality and buy you a couple of beers.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I'm glad it was a cloudy day today, because I don't think I would have got you off Bondi Beach. But
if you look at my nose, you can see it's burnt, can't you? I needed to get out of the sun.
You English people coming over here, we try to warn you. Make sure you wear your hat.
We take no notice.
Dave, I'd just like to say thanks for, and I do this when people come in, genuine police officers come in, and the service that you've given to your community, and that community being the UK, where you've worked so hard. So I think you've given a great insight into policing, and you've also got the honour of being the first Scotland Yard guy that we've had on the show. So there you go. So if you've got any others, I wouldn't mind chatting with them.
I'll let you know. There's bound to be some more, yeah.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Gary. Cheers.